Welcome to On Approach, your go-to podcast for expert insights in general aviation, proudly brought to you by Airmart. Airmart is a family-owned and operated aircraft brokerage that has been serving the aviation industry for over 50 years. We provide everything you need to make buying, leasing, or selling an aircraft simple and rewarding. Visit airmart.com to learn more. Our podcast discusses the latest trends, tips, and industry developments that matter most to pilots, aviation enthusiasts, and industry professionals. So buckle up, tune in, and get ready for a smooth descent into the exciting realm of On Approach.
Welcome back to On Approach, the podcast where we explore insights and strategies that matter to the aviation community. I'm your host, Kim Sutherland, and today we're diving into one of the timeliest topics of the year: how to maximize your tax benefits by purchasing an aircraft before the end of 2024. With us today are three highly respected voices in aviation and finance. First, we have Richard Yan, Chief Operating Officer of Advocate Consulting Legal Group. Richard has been with Advocate for more than 15 years as a legal advisor specializing in aviation tax strategy and holds a law degree from George Washington University. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks, Kim. I'm very glad to be here today.
We're glad to have you. Next, I'd like to introduce Grant Sutherland. He's a second-generation president of Airmart with a lifetime in the industry and more than 30 years as a pilot. Hard to believe. Grant pretty much has aviation in his DNA. And with thousands of aircraft transactions under his belt, we can safely say that Grant has a good handle on today's market. Glad you're here, Grant.
Glad to be here. One of my favorite topics, year-end bonus depreciation.
And finally, we've got Alex Martin, Vice President of Lending with AGL. Alex brings practical knowledge of financing and insurance to our discussion. He has an MBA from NSU, Florida, and a wealth of experience from his careers at Piper Aircraft, Lockheed Martin, and We Florida Financial. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Kim. Great to be here. Happy to talk to everybody today. We have some really exciting topics, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Glad to be here.
We sure do. Well, let's start with the big picture. Why is now such a critical time for businesses to act when purchasing an aircraft? Richard, why don't you set the stage for us?
Absolutely. So timing is everything, and I actually love closings this time of year because there's only a short part of the year left, and it can be relatively easy for clients to take maximum advantage of bonus depreciation, which gives an aircraft buyer the ability to write off 60% of the purchase price. And a lot of folks don't know this, but there's a special rule for aircraft that allows certain aircraft to take advantage of even 80% bonus this year and write off 80% of the aircraft purchase. And with late year closings, it's a lot easier to plan for 100% business use because the flight logs usually, it's going to be a few flights. Now, especially with 80% bonus, there's a number of hoops to jump through and some traps for the unwary. So folks will want to have a firm that specializes in aviation to make sure they take the steps necessary to properly qualify for the benefits. And as everyone here knows, pre-purchase inspection slots tend to start filling up. There's only so much bandwidth in the industry, and deals take time to set up and do properly, and there's only so much time left in the year. We also have Section 179 depreciation, which allows a deduction of up to $1.22 million, which can effectively provide 100% deductions for aircraft at or below that price, with some limitations, of course. And the nice thing with Section 179 is you can take the exact dollar amount that you want for that deduction. So if you only want to take deductions against top marginal rate income, and maybe you want to just take off, $800,000 off the top, that's fine. But in order to get either tax benefit this year, you have to get the aircraft placed in service this year. And, there's only so much time left in the year.
Right. It's that whole logistics of time. It's a real thing. Grant, what are you seeing happening in the market that means that makes acting now even more critical?
Yes, as we get into fourth quarter, everybody starts thinking about their tax planning for the year, meeting with their accountants. Some folks have already done that in September, and they have already started the acquisition process. We had a really good October, so fourth quarter is already in full swing. So we are now here in November, and we have already seen multiple acquisitions and transactions taking place. I'm currently in the process of a CJ1 acquisition for a client. And when we started the acquisition process at the beginning of October, we had selected 4 ideal CJ1s for this customer. And when we met with him yesterday, there was one left
Wow.
of the 4. So it is already taking place. It is already in full swing. So you need to act now. Now is absolutely the time. So it's an act now, act promptly situation because it is already in full swing.
Already. Alex, how does financing fit into this tight timeline?
Sure. And, financing is a real good question, especially if you've never financed an airplane before. What I usually tell folks is it's going to be more work than buying a car. This is not going into the dealership, getting a loan right there and leaving the same day. Now, for contrast, it's also not going to be as bad as a mortgage for most people, which is the good news. But the lenders, they require a full financial package, tax returns, bank statements, credit history. Approvals can take a bit of time, on occasion, a few business days for approval. And funding usually is going to occur a couple days after the pre-buy is finished. So on average, we've seen that it usually takes about 30 to 45 days for a person who goes from application through approval, through aircraft selection, through pre-buy to actual closing. So if you're looking to close by the end of the year, my advice, get that pre-approval in sooner than later. We get the financial approval done. You can use that, find the airplane you like, and it'll help expedite the closing a little bit.
Expedition is the key at
Oh,
this
yeah.
point. So
Yeah.
does anyone know at the date of this recording, how many days do we have left before the end of the year? Do we know off the top of our head? I know it's not many.
I think it's on our website. What is the countdown, Brian?
I have
think
to
it's like 57 days from the time of this right now. But in real practical nature of how much time we have left as of this recording, it's realistically 6 weeks. Because when you take into consideration the holidays and where they're falling this year,
Right.
December, Christmas is falling right in the middle of the week.
Right.
So December is very, very choppy. And when we looked at December of this year, you basically have 3 weeks in December. So it's tight. It's very tight. People got to get moving.
Right.
On our countdown, we have 52 days, 8 hours, and 22 minutes.
There you
Okay.
go. So there's
52
the exact time.
days, 8 hours, and 22 minutes. Right. And some of those days are, even though they may not be actual holidays, people will be taking them as holidays with the way
Yes.
that Christmas is falling this year. So back to what Richard was saying about getting pre-purchase inspections in.
Yep.
Even though Christmas may be the only official day off, there will be plenty of unofficial days off as well.
Yes,
So,
maintenance facility, all your MROs, they may take a couple extra days on each side of the holiday. The FAA loves to surprise all of us in the
Yes, they
industry
do.
and decide to make extra holidays. So Richard and I and Alex have all been caught up in those situations. We're
For
like,
sure.
really? You're not working today?
For sure.
So, our federal tax dollars. So anyhow,
Anyway, so bottom line is sooner rather than later.
yes.
All right. Well, let's talk for a minute about some of the typical planes that businesses consider for year-end tax planning. One plane that we currently have available in Airmart's inventory is the popular Cessna Caravan. Why is this so attractive for a year-end purchase? Richard, why don't you start?
Sure. So the Cessna Caravan is, it's a real workhorse. I think FedEx has almost a couple hundred of them.
Oh, wow.
And I've had clients that were able to expand their businesses in the past with the flexibility that it provides. It's a great candidate for bonus depreciation because it can provide a pretty healthy tax deduction, assuming you do all the relevant steps. And if you close in January, it's harder for folks to really get that 100% business use, right? Because almost everyone's going to have some amount of entertainment use that results in disallowance of some percentage of deductions. But with a year-end purchase of a aircraft that's as well regarded as kind of a business aircraft like the Caravan, you can really max out that tax benefit. I have clients who do a one-and-done business trip, right, where it's very well documented business trip. End of the year, that's their only flight, 100% business use, and they max out that 60 or 80% bonus deduction.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So as you're talking to customers, who's sort of the typical customer that's looking for a Caravan brand?
So typically the Caravan. Yeah, go ahead. So Richard and I both have. So Richard, what have you seen as your prospects and that typically are using Caravans? And then I'll chime in with the rest of it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we see a variety of clients who just aren't well served by the hub and spoke system of commercial aviation, and they're really able to get from point A to point B. Grant, you'll be able to talk better about kind of the fact that it can really carry a lot of cargo and business. So actually, I'll leave that to you.
Okay, excellent. So the caravan. So here is your typical prospect for a caravan. So caravans go into short range. It's an ideal short range aircraft. So if you have missions that are 500 nautical miles or less, it is an ideal candidate for that. And if you're wanting to move a lot of people or a lot of stuff. So the caravan has seating capacity for 8 in the back comfortably. So you have 8 plus pilot, co-pilot. It is a single pilot operated aircraft. So if you wanted to use the co-pilot seat as a passenger seat, we now take the density to 9 occupants, so 9 passengers in that aircraft. There's all kinds of configurations for the caravan. The one that we currently have configured does not have the cargo pod, but it does have the executive interior, but not the Oasis executive interior. So the interior that this aircraft has is ideal for 8 people. The other typical profile for this specific caravan that we have is aerial surveyors. So there are many companies out there that have contracts for bridge construction, infrastructure.
Sure.
So as we all know right now, there is a huge infrastructure taking place throughout the United States.
Yes.
And we have had lots of companies contacting us to acquire the aircraft for those type of purposes. So they have companies, they'll do surveys, and they use the caravan. And the caravan that we have is ideal because it doesn't have the cargo pod, and they create holes in the floor for cameras. And if that cargo pod is there, that prevents them that access to be able to put their equipment in the aircraft. So that's our most likely candidate. And then also people down in Florida, they love them. So if they've got businesses that are throughout the Caribbean, this aircraft is perfect for that. So if you're needing to do some island hopping to get to other resorts, other destinations that are business related, the caravan is perfect for that as well.
Bring some staff with you. And
Yep. So if you want to move a lot of people, we've had a couple of car dealers interested in the caravan because if they're wanting to move some of their general managers around to different stores, different locations, it's ideal when they're going to auctions. So when they're going to regional auctions and they're going to go buy cars.
Oh,
so,
sure.
Your car dealer will fill up their lots. A lot of people don't know this, but they go to car auctions. That's where they pick up the bulk of their used cars. So when cars come off of lease, they go to auction, and that's where the dealers will acquire several used cars. So they'll take a team.
They need to hop around.
Yep. So they'll take a team to do the buying because the cars, they'll go and pick, 80, 90 cars. So they have to take multiple buyers. So they'll take people that are specialized in buying these vehicles. So they need a team. And they also need a team to help with loading the car movers and all that stuff. So it's very helpful to have the caravan for those type of regional activities.
So bottom line is the caravan is just extremely versatile.
Very versatile.
Huge utility vehicle.
Absolutely.
Ready for so many different missions.
Yeah, super SUV of the sky.
The super SUV of the sky. I like it. I haven't seen that in the advertising yet, but maybe it should be. Okay, well, Grant, let's talk about the caravan in like a kind of a real world numbers way. So let's use it as an example of how a tax deduction might work for this specific airplane.
Sure. So this aircraft is currently priced at approximately $2.75 million. So if you were to acquire this aircraft in this tax year, you could take up to 60%. So 60% would be roughly $1,650,000 deduction. So if they are in the 37% federal tax bracket, that deduction translates to a tax savings of almost $610,000 for that year. That's over $600,000 back in their pocket.
Wow. And that they can reinvest back into their business as
Absolutely.
well.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people do. It's money on the books that they're able to use to help expand their business, buy other facilities, hire more staff, buy other equipment. So it really gives them some leverage to help grow the business.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really huge impact. Richard, do you have any other context to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Grant showed, aviation is a very tax-favored industry. It's one of our biggest exports and creates an incredible amount of jobs and economic activity in domestic manufacturing in this country. And because of that, as I mentioned, there's aircraft-specific tax provisions that most CPAs and General Tax Counsel don't know about, which allow 80% bonus this year with certain requirements being met. And Grant showed how huge that impact is at 60%. And if you were to qualify for 80% with the advice of specialized counsel, and they're in a state with a state income tax that can be 5 to 10%, you can end up looking at a $2.2 million deduction, and between state and federal taxes keeping up to $1 million of kind of the hard-earned money that this
That's
business owner
incredible.
can now invest in other areas of the business. And you have a plan that makes that required travel possible. And we can also often defer legally sales tax on the purchase for some tax savings there. And as Grant, I think Grant had a great example of a reason that the aircraft can sometimes also generate some revenue. We have clients who do some dry leasing or survey work, and there's a variety of tax and FAA issues that can come up with that. So you want experienced counsel for that, but it can be used for business in a variety of ways and really be a great business tool.
Great. So it's really more than just an airplane. It's like strategic value.
Absolutely. Yep, definitely. And a lot of people don't know this, and I get this question all the time, and they're like, well, I don't have that much cash to buy that kind of airplane to get that kind of deduction. So I think, Alex, if you can chime in here, but people need to know that you can still get that full deduction even on the financing piece. So you don't have to put all that out in actual cash. It can be financed. It can be a simple 15 to 20% down and finance the balance, and you still get the entire deduction. So I do get that question asked a lot, what do I have to pay?
Come out
cash?
of pocket.
Yeah, do I have to come out of pocket? And it's no, you do not have to come out of pocket. You can finance the asset and still get the full deduction of the value of the asset.
Did you have anything to add to that, Alex?
That's absolutely correct. On this type of airplane, a single engine piston or turboprop, you're probably looking around 20% down payment. On some really, really good deals, occasionally we might even be able to swing 15% down. It's not out of the question, but yeah, definitely, you can outlay that down and, keep the rest of the cash in your accounts as you wish. So don't need to purchase in cash. We can definitely help you with the financing.
Great. So extra leverage
Yep.
upon leverage. That's great. Let's take a look at the political landscape right now, which has changed a lot for a lot of people. How does Donald Trump's return to the White House in 2025 influence what businesses should do now? Richard, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kim, I'd like to mention just on that everyone was made some great points on the strategic value of the aircraft. Warren Buffett, one of the most tight-fisted investors of all time, right? Legendary investor.
Yes.
Originally named his private jet the Indefensible, but after he started using it and realized how much time he was saving, how much high-level executive time he was saving, he renamed it the Indispensable. And we see that all the time with our clients as well from a strategic value standpoint. When you realize how much more business you're able to do. And with Donald Trump's return to the White House, love him or hate him, I think he's a prime example of that strategic value as well, because as we all saw, President Trump would go to multiple in-person events day after day. And the reality is there's no way he could have done that without his own aircraft, right?
Absolutely.
It just would have been impossible. And I think we're hoping for renewed or expanded pro-business policies, but everything takes time with Congress. Never count on Congress snatching victory from defeat from the jaws of victory, right? So I think from the 2018 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that President Trump signed in his first term, we're still benefiting from some of those provisions, such as the possibility for 80% bonus. But one unfortunate note is that if nothing's done, that will decrease to 40% in 2025. So if we can get a deal done this year, I think that's still a great plan.
Yeah. Bird in the hand, correct?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All the more reason to act.
Act now. Absolutely.
This podcast should be Act Now.
Yeah, we should rename it the Act Now podcast. Well, you know what? How about you talk about the market, Grant? So from a market perspective, what does a Trump administration mean for the next 4 years?
Well, the landscape is, as we all know, a lot of aircraft owners are, business owners who are pro-Trump. And in this situation, business, like Richard said, Trump is a pro-business guy. So the landscape right now is very positive from most of our customers and most of our prospects. So they were very happy with what took place and what's happened. And, we're talking about tax cuts that Trump put in during his term that we're all still benefiting from today. So there is already proof in the pudding of that. So with him being back in, a lot of our customers are looking forward to what he is going to do in his administration going forward. So outlook is very positive.
Okay, that's great. Alex, what do you think about what a Trump administration will do for lending terms?
Sure, and that's the $1 million question, and I get this a lot from some of our customers, and mostly in regards to interest rates. They're curious. The new administration, are rates going to go down? Are they going to go up? Or are they going to go sideways? And the reality of it is nobody really knows. But what we do know is that the Fed has been pretty clear. They're going to continue some level of rate cuts through the next few months, which is good. The Fed has also, though, in tandem, they've still been reducing their balance sheet, with some quantitative tightening. And, the reality of that, I think they're still a little nervous on inflation. I think that's the reality of it. So as we go through the end of the year, I wouldn't expect any significant change in aircraft rates. If we're lucky, maybe they'll go down a little bit. Maybe my guess is they'll probably stay about the same. What's very important, though, is a lot of people ask, they say, Alex, the Fed raised or lowered rates, 0.25% or 0.5%, is my aircraft pre-approval? Is the rate going to go down for that? And the typical answer is it depends. The aircraft lenders, banks out there who do these types of loans, they don't always react directly in tandem with the Fed. So if the Fed lowers rates today, it does not mean that your current aircraft rate is going to drop tomorrow. There's usually a little bit of time that takes to pass before the aircraft lenders actually start to drop the rates after that. But I think we'll be pretty steady going through the end of the year. I don't think there'll be any surprises. Coming into next year, as obviously Trump comes into office, things could change. The one thing that will not change is Jerome Powell. He's independent. Trump can't get rid of him. Jerome's there until he wants to leave. So that's something important to remember. The Fed policy is somewhat independent of Trump. However, what could change is some level of, we all know this, Trump is somewhat unpredictable. He's come in, he said he's going to engage in some new strategies, some new tactics, whether that's tariffs, tax cuts, deportations, and all that may have some impact on cash supply, and may have some impact on inflation, on prices and everything like that. But my personal opinion is barring any sort of economic recession, I think we're going to have somewhat of a soft landing with interest rates. I think they'll slowly keep going down, but I don't think we're going to be back in the 3% range that we were at a few years ago. I think that's going to take a little while. So my advice to customers, if you get a rate that you like, on your pre-approval, even if you have a prepayment penalty on that thing for a year or two, you probably won't be refinancing it anytime in the short-term future. So if you like the rate, I'd say take the loan, keep it for a little while. And, once the prepayment expires, you can always revisit the possibility of refinancing to see if it'll save you some money.
Yeah, and rates are still just ridiculous. They're still low as it is right now. I mean,
compared,
Alex, what are you getting deals done at now? Like, what's for a well qualified buyer? 20% down, great asset, high credit score, good liquidity. What are you typically seeing?
Yeah, so with the well qualified buyer, the best available rates right now are probably say in the mid 6% range, and that's usually incredible. 20 years on the monthly payment. 15-20% down. And the kind of neat thing about those is the lowest rates actually being offered right now are actually through credit unions, believe it or not. There's a couple of credit unions out there who are fairly large players in the aircraft world and the lending world. And just because of their nature, their cost of funds, and the nature of the fact that they're nonprofit, they're able to offer a little bit of lower of a rate. And one of the benefits, of course, if you do use our services for your lending, is we have partnerships with those institutions, and we can help get you those rates. But yeah, I'd say most part you're looking in the mid sixes, which is really, if you look at it over a long-term history, 40, 50, 60 years, it's actually not too terrible. We've been somewhat spoiled in the last decade or two.
Yeah, the perspective got skewed for that short period of time where rates were so low. But yeah, anything in the sixes, in my opinion, is incredibly affordable on the financing side.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing is that there's really no reason to wait.
Right.
To take advantage of these tax benefits is still worthwhile, even if you think you might be able to get a better interest rate down the road.
Way outstrips 1%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let me ask you another question, Alex. Can you talk about, I know we touched on it earlier, but talk a little bit about how financing lets buyers leverage their capital?
Absolutely. So, the key question to this, and I get this from our customers a lot, what are interest rates? As I said, around mid-sixes for a strong file. But one thing we need to compare that to is really what has been the year-to-date return in the stock market. If you take a look at the S&P 500 right now, that thing is up over 24% year-to-date. I mean, even if you're just a passive investor, you just put in your money into like an S&P 500 index fund, or something similar to that, and not really buying or selling every day, you're still making some really, really good money on your liquidity. So we get a lot of customers that they say to me, they say, Alex, I'm even at 6%, I'm still better off putting my 20% down, keeping the rest of the money in one of my investment accounts. For them, it's actually a profitable venture to take the loan out at 6 or 7 or even 8%, when the stock market is having such strong returns. So yes, you can definitely leverage your financing. You can use your cash for something that may be a little more profitable than just using it directly to purchase the airplane itself. And I think it's something to consider. So as you look at this, talk to your tax advisor, talk to your investment, your investment guy, and see if it's a proper strategy for you. But for most folks, it usually is.
Richard, do you have any insights about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that Alex made. And, the government is effectively helping subsidize part of the purchase, right? Because we discussed, particularly whether you take 60 or 80% bonus, if you qualify for 80 in some states, you might put down that 20%, that $550,000, but then you get $1 million back.
Right.
And so it's very cash flow positive, right?
Yeah.
Where you're kind of getting paid by the government to close, and then you can put that money to work, whether you put it in an index fund and, or you invest it right into expanding your business. Either way, you're probably a good steward of deciding what you want to do with that money.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well said.
Yeah. And like you like to say, Grant.
Yeah, cash is king, right?
Cash is king.
Cash is king. Cash equals flexibility. So
Right.
You can expand your business. You can pay down debt. You can do whatever. But having that leverage is very important.
And keeping your reserves intact
Yep.
too is
Always gives you that
always a good
flexibility.
strategy. Yeah. So, to summarize, financing reduces your upfront costs and multiplies the immediate cash savings from your tax deductions. So it's a smart choice for businesses that want to maximize immediate liquidity and long-term value.
Yeah. I mean, basically this tax benefit is funding the entire purchase and then some, as Richard just spelled out. So it really is a no-brainer.
Wise words, yes. Well, let's take all of that and get practical with it. So, Richard, if a business owner is hearing this and wants to act, what are some of the first steps they need to take?
So I would say the first steps, and this time of year is always, usually pretty busy because these business owners are getting their pro forma numbers for the year. And, they're getting, and this is a good problem to have, but they're getting some of the largest tax bills that they might have ever seen in their lives, right? Because despite all the challenges that we've seen in the last 12 months, they've been able to do very well for business, and then they realize I'm spending hundreds of hours a year sitting behind a car or waiting in an airport and facing delays and cancellations, and they realize I'm doing so well without a plane, but I can reduce my windshield time by 50, 60, 70% for themselves and senior staff. So I had a client who kept losing senior staff who, are expensive to hire and onboard, but they had attrition because, they realized they were having so much attrition. They were still doing really well, but they had so much attrition because they weren't able to get these folks back in time to have dinner with their families. The last commercial flight out was, early afternoon, I think 1 o'clock. So your last meeting has to be done well before noon to go drop the rental car off, check your bags in, account for possible travel delays with traffic, et cetera. And so, they had these senior executives that were getting paid quite a bit of money, waiting for the early bird flight the next day. And, if they bought a plane like the Caravan, they can now finish the meetings in the afternoon. All these senior staff are home by dinner time. And this client, hasn't had to pay substantial headhunter fees and lose productivity due to constant staffing attrition because now people are happy they're able to get home in time and they're able to do more business. So, for these business owners, get an idea of what works for your business, and talk to your advisors. As Grant noted, there's more buyers, but there's also more sellers. So it's a great time for both sides because of all the liquidity and tax benefits. And we're in a niche industry, so there's only so many great brokers like Grant, folks who understand aircraft financing like Alex, and only so many aviation lawyers and accountants that do these deals week in and week out that are familiar with these special rules. So review your financials, projected income, deductions, and get the ball rolling. And, once you get that in place, you'll clarify the economic impact of any purchase and help you plan the rest of the process.
Great. Okay. So, Grant, once someone has done those things, what should they do next?
So it's really going to be important to quickly identify, with a broker. So you need to figure out, what it is that you're looking to do, what your needs are, and then figure out a broker that's going to work well with you for that specific mission. So what we always do is the first thing when a client calls in, hey, I'm thinking about buying an airplane, right? So what we want to do is we want to go through their mission profile. Who's going, where are we going, how many people, what are the expectations? So really understand what the trip is going to be. And there's no perfect aircraft for every individual owner. There's just not. Buying an airplane is a series of compromises. So, what I tell people is they're like, well, I want to take all these people and I want to go to this destination. I want to go to this far-flung place. And, I can say, well, you need a Gulfstream 550, right? So that would be the ultimate plane to fix everything that they're wanting. But what's the compromise? It's too expensive. So there's always a series, even if you could afford it, it's just too expensive for what you're trying to accomplish. So what we always do is just tell them, say, look, you buy an airplane for 75 to 80% of what you're going to use it for. So those far-flung trips, you take, those outliers of, hey, I want to go to Hawaii, right? Well, how long are you going? How many times are you going to Hawaii?
Right.
Well, once every 2 years. Well, you're going to take an airline for that. So we always try to make sure that we fit that mission profile. And a good broker will do that for you. They will sit down and really understand what your needs are first, and then try to find the aircraft that's going to best fit that. When people go from the approach of, hey, trying to fit a plane into somebody's mission that's not the right mission is the wrong way to do it. And we get people call us like, I don't know why I bought this airplane. I thought it was a good deal, but it doesn't fit my mission. It doesn't fit for what we're doing. So, range, people, all of that is so important when you're trying to identify that ideal aircraft. So you want to work with a good broker that's going to give you good advice. And then once they can find that correct mission, then they find the plane for that mission, and then it's about getting into the details of that aircraft. Okay, what's the history of it? Is it on engine programs? Where has it been? Who's maintained it? So there's a lot of details that go beyond that, and there's a lot of pitfalls that people don't understand. Jets and turboprops are complex machines, and there's a lot of inspections, and there's programs and engine programs, and there's deferments. There's just a whole list of things. It's not just simply pick up the phone and buy a plane. So you want to work with a qualified expert, just like there's a qualified expert for the airplane. As we hear from Richard in this whole tax strategy, there are very, very important tax strategies and planning that you need to have an expert like Richard. For financing side, you need an expert like Alex to walk you through those pieces. Hey, how do I obtain the financing? Who's going to give me the best rate? So working with those individuals is a very important piece.
And as we're looking at year end, you also want to work with a broker who can help things happen quickly for you. Correct. So, for example, like Airmart is an inventory broker.
Yes.
So we have planes on hand that could be ready to go.
Absolutely. So what we've done, we've been doing this for years and years, and we've been through the year-end crunch. We've been through, hey, a guy that'll call you on December 10th and is like, I got to buy a plane right now. I got to spend $600,000. So what we do is we take our inventory, since they are aircraft that we have owned. All of the airplanes that we purchase for resale go through rigorous pre-purchase inspections. We develop extensive squawk lists. We go through those squawk lists. We knock out those items that have either been deferred or neglected or that need attention. We address those. The average airplane, we spend over 100 shop hours on each aircraft before we resell it. And we developed a program called ACE, which is an Airmart certified edition. So we've brought the pre-owned market space of the automobile industry into the aviation industry. And we developed this ACE program. So it's a 22-point inspection. And it solved this issue of, hey, I need to buy an airplane now. I need a pre-buy. Well, the shops were busy. They couldn't get it in. So we developed this simplistic 22-point inspection for your high-performance piston aircraft. So it's not developed for the turbines and the jets. But what we have done is we've got some of our aircraft that are perfectly positioned to be able to be bought with low risk for the year end. For example, the Caravan, it's so new. It's such a late model aircraft. It's a 2021. It's on a Pratt & Whitney engine program, which gives you assurances on the motor. So it's got a paid-in Pratt & Whitney engine program. It's on Cessna's parts program. It's been maintained by Cessna Service Centers. So that is a turnkey aircraft that could be done and bought this year.
And be put into service before the end of the year.
Absolutely.
Because that can be one of the pitfalls is not being able to get it into service.
Correct.
When
There's no outstanding inspections, no outstanding anything left. I mean, it's ready turnkey. You can
no surprises.
No surprises. Jump in it today.
Yeah. Alex, I know financing is obviously a big piece of the puzzle, as we've been talking about. So how should buyers prepare now to be able to make that go as smoothly as possible?
My recommendation is really, and I don't mean to toot my own horn here, but my recommendation is use a loan broker. Obviously, we'd prefer you to come to AGL, but the benefit of using a broker is they'll help match you with the right bank. There's only probably about a very limited number of banks out there that do a significant amount of aircraft lending. And, the interesting thing is some of those banks who do aircraft lending don't actually advertise it. So if you go on Google and you're looking for this, or you're looking through Flying Mag, trying to find some advertisements for banks, you'll find a few, but the reality of it is you're not going to find all of them. And if you really take the time to call everybody, try to apply, submit your application, do credit pulls, it's going to take you a lot of time to find the best terms and the best fit for your personal needs. Whereas if you go to a broker, we can do a quick interview with you. We'll give you a quick financial review, and we can figure out exactly where to assign you. A lot of customers may have very unique situations, whether it's their income reporting, time in business, credit history, et cetera. And it may make them nervous about whether or not they're going to be able to get approved. But if they go through a broker, we can match them directly up with the lender who can work with that kind of specific situation. So definitely, if you go to the broker, it's going to save you some time. The other cool thing about going to a broker, and a lot of people don't realize this, is generally speaking, the customer will not pay us for their services. Generally speaking, the broker actually gets paid by the bank at closing. So you're still going to get a good competitive rate. You're not going to have a markup on fees. We actually work hand in hand with the banks to help drive them business. It's pretty much where we kind of fall into the mix. But the important thing, though, most importantly, we are getting really close to the end of the year. So my recommendation is before, get yourself pre-approved. Even if you haven't found an airplane yet, it's okay. Get the pre-approval in, because what happens at the end of the year is these banks only have a limited amount of processing staff. So as we get closer to the end of the year and everybody wants to close, if you haven't gone your pre-approval yet, you might risk not getting approved before the end of the year. So I highly recommend get that pre-approval in, and that will help expedite your closing through the end of the year.
Yep, we have seen that before where the lenders will actually say we are not taking any more loan applications from X date. And usually that's within probably about 2 weeks from the end of the year. So they just close the books and just say we cannot process any more loans in the amount of time for the year end. So Alex makes a great point. Again, do it now. You got to get on it now. You've got to get your application in. You've got to start working with a broker. You got to start planning with Richard. I mean, these things have to happen now.
Right. And one of the primary things about the December 31st deadline is that the plane has to be in service before that deadline. And we talked about that a little bit so far, but I'm not sure everybody knows what that means. Richard, can you explain to us what it means to have an aircraft placed in service by December 31st?
Sure. So having it placed in service means the aircraft has to be operational and used for its intended trade or business purpose. So this typically means you want to have a business flight before December 31st and finalize all your FAA registration and insurance documentation and all that. Otherwise, the government could take the position that the aircraft was used to fly the kids to Disney World or grandkids to Disney World, right? If there's no use profile, then, the IRS is going to let their imagination run wild, and the taxpayer bears the burden of proof. So having documentation that you met with a supplier or met with finance or insurance folks to discuss capital requirements or insurance needs for your business for the upcoming year is critical. And we love these one and done where you hit that 100% and maximize that bonus deduction.
Yep. Absolutely.
Smart.
Yeah. And in your experience, people have to account for inspection schedules and whatnot too, Grant, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the MROs, the facilities, maintenance facilities get filled up. Those slots get filled. Again, that's why ACE has been huge help for us through these year-end crunches.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, in thinking about maintenance schedules, sometimes people want to improve their airplane or make improvements to it as they're buying it. Are those improvements also deductible, Richard? So if someone wants to refurbish something or buy something that's been refurbished, are those tax deductible as well?
Yeah, as long as they're using it for business. We've had a variety of clients who do upgrades, such as Wi-Fi is a popular one for productivity. And the tax code has some special rules on when avionics or interior refurbishments or engine work can be expensed or capitalized. But even if capitalized, you have 60 or possibly 80% bonus through Section 179 to kind of get that tax benefit right away. So, from a 40,000 foot view, I would say, enhanced deductions are available for anything that folks are doing, but similarly has to be done by the end of the year in order to put that on that depreciation schedule or expense.
Okay, great. And Alex, can people finance just the improvements they're about to do to the plane? How does that work?
Absolutely. So that's kind of like a really good question. If you find an airplane that you like, but it's not everything that you need, we can finance those improvements in with your loan. So basically what happens is before closing, you need to tell us and get a quote. For example, here's a quote for an engine overhaul, or here's a quote for some new avionics or a paint job or interior. And what happens is the bank will base your loan off of the future value of the airplane, including those upgrades. And then at closing, they'll hold back some money in an escrow account to basically pay the shop directly, in which case that ensures that the work gets done. So the bank has the collateral they're expecting when the work finishes, and the customer gets to do the improvements that he wants and ultimately have the purchase or the airplane that they're looking for. So yeah, if you're looking to upgrade the plane, shoot us over some quotes. My team is happy to run some valuations on that to let you know what it's going to do to the value of the airplane after the purchase. And we're happy to give you some numbers on it.
Great. Anything else that you'd like to add, Grant or Richard, as far as financing and getting things ready to be put into service before the end of the year?
Richard, you want to go with that one? Any other comments?
I think that was a lot of great points. And I think we always remind folks that they want to get a great team to kind of help them, just like you wouldn't hire a general attorney that writes, 1 or 2 wills a year to handle your trust and estates planning. You want experts like Grant and Alex that are always doing transactions, right? And you want advisors that are on top of the industry-specific rules and have specialized software to cover the legal, tax, and compliance challenges that are required for, kind of doing it all properly, tax responsibly, and getting you the plane that, fits your mission best and all of that.
Great. Alex, if you could say one last thing to the listeners that are ready to go ahead and take all of this information that we've given them and they're ready to take action, what word advice would you give them as we leave them?
Absolutely. My number one advice, please get pre-approved. I can't say it enough.
Get pre-approved now.
It really is. Get pre-approved now. And most of these approvals, I'll be honest, most of these approvals are good for usually around 90 days.
Nice.
So if for some reason, even you don't buy the airplane by the end of the year, you can still use that pre-approval to early next year if you have to go that route. So it'll give you the time, it'll give you the flexibility, it'll make things a whole bunch easier at closing. But in addition, and again, not to toot my own horn, but, if you're going through a brokerage, be careful in the brokerage you go through. And the reason is some of them are very, very, very large, in which case it actually somewhat slows down your process. So if you go with a brokerage that is a little bit smaller, a little more agile, you're going to get quicker customer service, quicker responses. It's really, really going to help your experience, and it's going to help your turnaround. And, even as I said, there's only a certain amount of banks out there that do these. So you might get the same bank depending what broker you go to, which is a funny thing. But if that's the case, I'd prefer to go with a broker who's going to be able to take care of you, pick up the phone every time you call and give you that service that you need. So Absolutely. That would be my suggestion.
Especially when time is of the essence at this point. How about you, Grant? So as our listeners are hearing all of this, what would you tell them to walk away from this podcast and do?
Act now. act now. There is no time left. You've got to get moving. So get the pre-approval. Talk to Richard. Discuss the tax advantages. Get together with this group of people. You got to start moving. Make time in your schedule. Allocate for this. It's a huge tax savings. It's a huge opportunity. I mean, this strategy, like we've said over and over again, the government through this incentive is essentially paying for the aircraft. So your tax liability is being used to purchase an airplane. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't get any better than that. So in order to take advantage of it, though, you got to act now. Here we are in November, so there is not any time left. So get on it, get moving. So sense of urgency needs to be very, very high.
Okay. Well, guys, Richard and Alex and Grant, we can't thank you enough for being with us today. I think we've all learned a lot about how purchasing an aircraft can benefit your business in multiple ways, from saving you windshield time to tax incentives to basically just being a good strategic investment overall. And to our listeners, the clock is ticking.
Absolutely.
The time is now. You can get started by connecting with Richard at Advocate Consulting Legal Group, Alex at AGL, and of course Grant at Airmart, using the links that we've got below. And don't forget to give us a subscribe and a follow. Until next time, smooth skies and happy holidays. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to On Approach, your go-to podcast for expert insights in general aviation. Join us next time for another smooth descent into the exciting realm of On Approach, proudly brought to you by Airmart. Airmart is a family-owned and operated aircraft brokerage that has been serving the aviation industry for over 50 years. We provide everything you need to make buying, leasing, or selling an aircraft simple and rewarding. Visit airmart.com to learn more.